Thank you all for coming today. We're here with Morra Aarons-Mele, the author of Hiding in the Bathroom, An Introvert's Roadmap to Getting Out There When You'd Rather Stay Home. If I may give a little bit of a synopsis, it's largely about being an introvert when you face things that are difficult for an introvert. It's been easier for many of us to stay in a corner on our own, but Morra's work has forced her to go out, and so she writes about how to deal with this tension as opposed to give up and stay away from it altogether. Please, a round of applause for Morra.
Thanks, David. Nice to see you.
How would you describe being an introvert and the challenge you face as a result of it?
I call myself an ambitious introvert. I don't know if that phrase resonates with any of you. I also have a lot of anxieties. I have social anxiety. I have flying anxiety. You know, sometimes for me, sort of leaving the house and going out in the world can be challenging, especially in these times. And yet, I run a business, and I chose to write this book, which has taken me out of my comfort zone in every way possible, because it's the manual that I wished I had had when I was trying to build my career. I didn't know that I was an introvert. I didn't know that I had anxiety. I just knew that I cried a lot in the bathroom and quit lots of jobs. I felt like walking into the office some days was an assault on my senses. And, you know, as I got promoted in my career, I worked in political consulting and digital marketing. And so, you know, as the sort of demands increased to run teams, run meetings, collaborate, negotiate, sell, network, all the stuff that you really have to do, I literally I felt like it was an assault. I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't have a manual. And so instead, I hid a lot in the bathroom. I still hide in the bathroom a lot. I don't know if you do too. I haven't been to the bathroom here. So I wanted to really provide a really practical, if you see the book, it's super practical. There's worksheets, there's tear sheets, and we take on business development, networking, how to survive a professional networking event. That's a huge one. Social media, right? How do you get out there? Everyone says you should get out there. You should have a personal brand. Certainly as you grow in your career, if you take on a more public-facing role. And this is tough for some of us.
Most of the crowd that I see here is engineers. But as engineers, every time we look for a job, that's an issue. But also, people who are not software engineers don't appreciate how much collaboration is part of the work we do. We may be able to get by with relatively little if we only go to the things that we are called to. But if we have an idea we want to promote, as you're familiar, you need to get someone's attention. You need to push an idea that maybe somebody doesn't want to put his attention on. Mm-hmm. And so some of these things are certainly more relevant to us in ways other than your personal experience directly. One of the things you've described yourself as is an ambitious overachiever.
Yes.
So,
no one here is an ambitious overachiever, I'm sure. No.
Well, it's easy to be an overachiever in ways that are solitary with our field until you get into industry. Yep. When you're in industry, you aren't just writing a program anymore and then letting the world see it. You have to interact with everybody else who your software is affecting in any way. How do you reconcile having that urge to achieve and facing the fearsome dog ahead of you that you don't want to interact with?
That's right, and I think for something like I would imagine if you've written something, I have felt this way about my passion projects, and this is where introverts can really shine. If we are creative people, which I believe software engineering is very creative as well, we have the ability to have faith in our project and our work and to carry it to a certain place. So how do you translate that, not only in being able to stand up in front of a group and sell in that vision, which is an essential skill, but be able to negotiate with other people to make your thing come to life. And this can be hard for introverts, sometimes because we've gotten feedback, right, in our career, or even in school, that we aren't heard, right? Because we may be talked over a lot. I don't know how many of you have felt that. And of course, there are gender and race and age implications and all of that, right? Depending on where you're at in your career, you might get talked over more or less. And so I think one of the skills that I had to learn the hard way, and that I encourage companies now to teach, is how to help that ambitious introvert with an idea, negotiate it, sell it, right? You're not born learning how to code. You're not born learning how to know Excel or PowerPoint or Keynote or any of these things. You're taught. And so one of the things that I think we have to seek and give in companies is how to birth your idea socially in the office culture.
At Google, many of us, perhaps not a predominant fraction, but many of us have not had a very social experience before coming here. And so many of us are shorter on those social skills and would benefit from them. But it sounds like this is general useful advice for companies to help their employees thrive.
Well, and you have a rich peer culture here, which I think can be really valuable. You know, I always say that it's great to adopt an extrovert. You know, if there is someone who you see has that skill set, right? Whether it's being able to have someone see their vision, being able to negotiate and listen. I mean, one of the things that introverts are really good at, and if you can think of selling in your software project as a sort of negotiation, is it may be tempting for us to sort of learn to go in and tell everyone about our project. But one of, I think, the natural skills of introverts is that we do absorb and we tune in. And so before you sell, and I have this in the book in the chapter on selling and negotiate, read the room, right? Tune in to the other conditions, do your research. We're very good at preparing. And the layer of sometimes those of us with anxiety makes us prepare even more. And so you can learn how to use your introvert like superpowers to actually take a step back and sell in a project.
You describe yourself as somewhat of a hermit, an introvert, socially anxious. I know these aren't synonyms, they aren't distinct. Could you talk about where they overlap and what the difference? Introvert is one that I didn't even understand until a few years ago when I learned from a friend.
There's a lot of myths about what an introvert is. There's a lot of great books and literature out there, and I think it's becoming much more socialized and acceptable. We understand that we are born probably more introverted, more extroverted. It's not something that we learn, although most introverts, right, we learn how to fake it at some point, certainly if we're going to go out and sell or be public in any way. I was on Boston Public Radio last week, and Jim Braude said to me, well, you don't seem like you suffer from introversion. I mean, you can make eye contact with me and you're laughing. And I was like, what are you talking about? You know, it is not. Introversion doesn't necessarily mean that you're quiet. It doesn't mean even that you're shy. Actually, if you're shy, it may mean that you have social anxiety, or if you're just a little shy. An introvert is someone who needs time and space and does great work alone, who gets that creative energy alone. And when you go into overwhelming situations, whether it's walking into a whole hotel lobby with lots of fluorescent lights and noise, or an open plan office, frankly, I mean, I'm obsessed with open plan offices, and I have a whole chapter in the book about how to survive an open plan office or a pod situation. If you feel like I do, like you're Superman and the kryptonite is draining your energy, you're probably an introvert, right? But it doesn't mean you're quiet or that you don't talk. It just means that you recharge and you need a more quiet environment to do your best work. And you like to be alone with yourself, which I think is amazing. Social anxiety is another layer that I talk about in the book and that I separate out, because many of us, whether we're awkward as kids or, you know, no one will sit with us at lunch, or we have whatever kind of trauma, we have intense performance anxiety and fear of social situations. Even picking up the phone to call a colleague or a client, walking into a meeting, we assume people won't like us. And again, this is a real challenge as you grow in your career and you have to sell. Being a hermit is I use it tongue-in-cheek. I actually trademarked the term. I'm a hermit entrepreneur. And this is my choice. I left corporate America about 10 years ago and decided that I was going to work for myself. I started a small business, successful business, small business. I decided I didn't want to become a corporate executive. I didn't want to have a big career in the typical sense. I was willing to make less money and have less power systemically because it is that important to me to work from home. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but it really is. I love to work from home. I like to be by myself. I love my favorite day, and this may not apply to you, is a day without meetings. I mean, we were talking about email. Email is also a big sensory overload for a lot of us, but a day without meetings and time to think. And so I created a business that allows me to build in days alone, time to think, and then I hit the road.
How do you reconcile being a mother of 3 with having time alone at home?
It's hard, you know, but I mean, this is, oh God, this feels horrible to admit, but I build in my alone time during my work day because when your kids don't care, right? Your kids don't care if you need a break. So what I try to do is I try to protect my time during the work week actually to get a lot of time to think. And I justify it by actually saying it helps me run my business. It's where I have my best ideas. It's where I come up with solutions and figure out how to pay for things and hire new people. But yes.
One of the complications of working at home.
Yes.
Parent.
Not everyone's made to work from home. It's a discipline. I don't know if you have a work from home policy here. I think that some people really seek it and some people it drives them crazy.
We were talking earlier about how social anxiety and introversion can be different for women than men, broadly. Of course, it's not going to be the same in every case. Could you talk some about how it differs for women in ways that might not be obvious to us who are not?
I mean, I think one of the things that has been really remarkable to me, and I love seeing so many men here today, is, you know, my publisher, I wrote the book sort of geared towards women because that's my bias. I run a business called Women Online, and I create political and social marketing campaigns that mobilize women. But I think what's interesting is that men feel work-life conflict, right? The tug between home, work, the pressure. Certainly, I mean, this is one thing I talk a lot about in the book when you think of sales and negotiating. And again, it's a bit different maybe in an environment like this, but you will come up against it, I think, to be that sort of alpha male salesman. That's something that women don't really face. We face a lot of other biases. But I've heard from many introverted men at work who feel really frustrated. One guy said to me, I gave a talk last week in Cambridge, and he said, how did the extroverts win everything? He felt in his work experience that because he was more quiet, he was not your typical sort of get out there kind of glad handler, that he felt he didn't fit in at his office, which I felt was really sad for him. So I think for men, there are barriers to feeling, certainly if you do like me, you're a hermit, you love to work from home, you like alone time, you don't maybe want to go out and take clients out for drinks or dinner or sell in all those ways, that's a barrier. For women, if we are more introverted, data show we are less likely to get promoted. We earn less money, and of course women earn less money anyway, and we fight to get heard anyway. So there's really a double-barreled assault on women, I think, who again may not present in a typical leadership fashion. You know, you only have to look at our politics to see right now, and I promised I wouldn't get political, but I can't help it, that too often the salesperson in chief wins in our culture, certainly when it comes to what we see as leadership. I could not help feeling all during the election that Hillary Clinton is really an introvert, and if she could just, you know, sell her policies in small groups and connect in an authentic way, things would be so much different. And yet we got the sort of man in front of the room talking and selling. And I think that that's powerful, and that extends to every corporate environment and every leadership environment. We need to think about that, and gender is a piece.
You wrote that you would be more successful if you went to cocktail parties more.
37% more successful if I went to cocktail parties.
Could you explain that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's amazing now that we have so many online tools to network, and I talk about that a lot in the book. In many, many business environments, we are obsessed with networking. It is, I call it enlightened bro. There are guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and Tim Ferriss out there, and they're full of tips to solve your life. But if you watch any leadership video on YouTube, chances are there is going to be something about getting out there, about networking, right? Still, the old chestnuts of never eating lunch alone. Again, prevalent in our culture. And if you're like me and you're sort of allergic to this, and you go to a professional conference and, think, oh gosh, how am I going to survive the cocktail hour? I just want to go back to my hotel room and hide, or whatever meetup group or whatever you're part of to sort of advance your career, and it's important. Again, you can always feel like you're at odds. So I probably would be more successful if I liked networking more, but I've also made my peace with it, and that's why, for me, blogging and participating in online community has been a savior, because I can find connections online, I can blog and connect with people who care about what I do, and it doesn't matter if we're going for drinks at the local Hilton on a Tuesday night.
You communicate on your terms.
I communicate on my terms from bed.
instead of party terms. You hinted at having advice for people for the most important thing that they could do when at parties. Could you explain that? I was curious what it was.
Yes, well, the last chapter of the book, and actually if you go on hidinginthebathroom.com, I have a 16-point guide to getting out there when you have to. And one of the things that I talk about is, and again, this is simple advice, but it's really, really powerful, is that feeling of anticipatory anxiety when you have to walk into a networking event, or you have to go to a presentation, or meet a new team, or whatever you feel. I think it's really important to sort of physically get a sense of yourself. Actors do this before they get on stage. They check in with themselves. They check in with their motivation. Why am I here? I feel that all the time. I want to be at home. Why am I here? I don't want to go on this business trip. I'm scared. I don't want to walk in this room. Why am I here? Sometimes it's as simple as I have to pay the bills. That's legit. Sometimes it's I care about my work. I want to share what I've written. I want to bring this. So checking into the meaning and checking into your body. For me also, and I don't know, this is different for everyone, I have clothes that I wear. I have literally, I'll put my lipstick on, I will put on my armor and become the person who would play me in the movie, because I can then get that person out there. And then I follow what my friend Dr. Ellen Hendrickson calls the 10-second rule, and she's a social psychologist. You can do anything for 10 seconds. You can even put your feet over fire for 10 seconds. So just give yourself that push, walk into the room or walk up to someone and say, hi. Right? And then muscle memory takes over. The other tip that I have, and this is one that I actually talk to a lot of people about, and you'll hear this a lot. I call it channeling your inner Oprah, but some people play journalist. Especially if you're an introvert, you don't like the spotlight. Ask people questions. Again, tune in to other people. You don't have to be the best conversationalist to be remembered as a great conversationalist, because if you're present with someone and you can ask them questions, they'll think that you are. Anyway, I have lots of other good tips, but one thing I also wanted to say is to give yourself a reward. This is something that you can think of if you're at a professional conference. Did you know that there are, I think it's 137 professional conferences in the US a day? It is the most booming industry. And so again, the way that we're taught now to network more than ever, we're also expected to go to conferences more than ever, which is weird. I mean, certainly in tech, conferences are like out of control, right? So for me, I'll do my research about who I want to meet. I'll say I got to meet 3 people, and then I let myself leave. Sometimes I'll go hide in the bathroom, I'll go hide in my hotel room, and it's okay.
Set a quota.
Set a quota, set a goal.
There's a term that you used, I didn't get to the part of the book where you explain this term, but I'm curious what it means. You mentioned achievement porn.
Achievement
could
porn,
you explain that?
A while back, I wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review about the rise of entrepreneurship porn. I'm glad you think it's funny. I've been a sort of player on the edges of the Boston tech and VC scene and the sort of women in tech scene for many years now, and then in LA. And it's very sexy to be an entrepreneur. It's very sexy to work at a startup. It's probably still sexy to work at Google, so you guys have that. But as you know from your friends, whenever you work at a startup or if you found a startup, it's very sexy. People want to talk to you. You're an entrepreneur, right? And so the media and networking culture and leadership talks and this whole conference industry has really glamorized entrepreneurship, especially tech entrepreneurship, right? It's made it seem like that's what we should aspire to. And scaling and never sleeping and tirelessly fighting until we get funded or we grow. And I call it porn because you know it when you see it, right? You read all these profiles of these young entrepreneurs who would stop at nothing and made $1 gazillion. Very few of us can do that, even if we're smart enough. For me personally, and the people that I interview in my book and my podcast, they didn't want to do that. You know, some of us wanted to have really great lifestyle businesses. We needed to step back from the entrepreneurship porn. And the achievement porn too, you know, it's this sense that if you don't give 110% every single day, you're letting the side down.
So it's the false image.
It's the false image, it's the glossy image. Even failure is sort of glamorized because we read a lot of stories about these sort of epic failures, certainly in Silicon Valley and New York, but they never really feel like failures to me. I don't know about you. They sort of feel like just a blip in the road till the next big one, and life isn't like that.
You mentioned the tech industry's passion for an entrepreneur who drives an idea and starts a company, but I feel like we're changing more broadly than that. More and more people are expected to make their job, as you've done, even without building a company, just as a sole contributor who is also the CEO of the company, you might say. And that requires a lot of social networking of sorts as well, a lot of often cold calling to start a business that doesn't exist because no one else has done it for you. Given that many of us, well, maybe not in this room this year, but many of the people watching this may find themselves in that state while looking for their next job, finding that they need to make it themselves. If they prepare themselves to walk into that room, then they're talking to the people and their nerve fails them. Do you have any advice for how to pull yourself back together when you feel you're not up to the task?
I mean, I think it's about tapping into the meaning and the motivation. I like to use the metaphor of being a craftsperson. You know, if you had built a house that this really lovely family were going to move into and you had lovingly taken care of every element, you would be proud to talk about it. I'm a big fan of freelancing and consulting, although there are many things that are bad about it, and you probably will make less money, you will have maybe less of a systemic impact. You got to think about healthcare. But for many of those people, are you in 5 years from now, if you leave this place and go walk into a room to make it on your own, even if it is as a consultant, don't feel like you need to start afresh. Often your best clients will be your old company, the people that you used to work for. You know, an introvert's gift is actually managing a network in a way that is good for us. And so I find that we're actually good at sustaining those long relationships. I have a rule called the 10 touches, which is in the book. I learned it from my husband, my favorite adopted extrovert. But for me, I can handle 10 business development touches a week. It might be just dropping you an email, which I know now you won't see, but that's okay. It could be calling someone. It could be recommending someone on LinkedIn, right? Making some sort of outward gesture. I can do all of this from my home office. But if I have the discipline of reaching out to 10 people a week, and you can do this actually while you're working for someone else to help build that network and help build that future network of potential employers, funders, colleagues, staff, whatever, you know, I'm a big believer in breaking things down into bite-sized chunks, bearable chunks. So I do the 10 touches every week. I keep my network going. And so then I'm never so scared to walk into a room because I know why I'm there. I try to have a sense that I am not alone in this work, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. Is this a good time for questions from the audience?
Sure thing. If anyone has questions.
So I don't know whether, you know, the leadership of Google would consider themselves introverts like Larry Page and Sundar. But they don't strike me as the, like, you know, usual sort of CEO, right? When you see them speaking publicly, they're not as, you know, comfortable or polished. I don't know that I have a particular question, but like any thoughts about that and kind of, you know, tech leadership in general, I guess, and kind of where people fall on the introvert extrovert sort of scale.
I think that's really interesting, and I was thinking about that actually as I was coming in. Again, coming back to the fact that these are skills that you learn, I think that if you are gifted and you create an amazing tech company, and I think of Bill Gates and I think of, all the leaders of these big tech companies, they are not necessarily the most comfortable public speakers, but they give public speeches every day when they reach a certain point in leadership. And I do think they are changing the model. I think that's really cool. But what's interesting to me is at the same time we have these leaders who are changing the model and do seem like they're more introverted and probably would be much more comfortable in a smaller group or one-on-one or even behind the screen. We have sort of this flourishing how-to culture of conferences and gurus telling us to get out there. And so to me, it's like actually a little confusing. Should I be a great networker or should I just pursue my own passion? I think the answer is pursue your own passion and you'll figure it out later. If you're good enough at what you do, no one's going to care if you don't give a great speech. And you will notice that when they're talking about things they really care about and they're really comfortable with, they come alive, right? They don't feel awkward anymore.
I saw that with the professor when I was an undergraduate.
Yes.
Sophomore classes, he was like a robot. Junior year classes, he was a fire.
I bet someone taught him, or he just liked that class better.
It was the material difference,
Yeah,
not a change.
Oh, hi, Morra.
Hi.
I had a question about, so you talked about creating sort of like space and alone time in the
Yeah.
business that you create. Do you have recommendations for how to do that within a corporate environment? Given that we are in an open layout, there's always a lot of noise around us. People are always walking around, or you just hear like conversations, right, from people that are sitting right next to you. Yeah, do you have, I guess, recommendations for how to sort of carve out that time for yourself, even in that environment?
Yeah, that's chapter 10 in the book. And to be honest, I think that it's a very individual thing. I hear you on the open plan. I think that more companies, and I don't know about Google, and I'd actually be very curious to know, are building in more private space, especially with the rise of pod-based setups and sort of agile everything, where there is so much collaborating happening, right? I think people also understand that individual teams might want a quiet space to collaborate, but that people need a break. We're all over-meetinged. I also think the rise of Slack, and I guess here you use GChat, but the constant communicating, not just face-to-face, but online while we're sitting publicly, is very draining. I think if you can and you are able to do your best work, talking to your manager, and if working from home is your thing, if there's a quieter place, I think many of us are socialized, and I totally understand it, to be afraid to ask for what we need to get our best job done. But I have some amazing statistics in the book. Your boss will accommodate you because she doesn't want you to leave. It's very expensive and it's a major pain in the butt. And so being prepared, having a plan and saying, I have to get this project done. I need quiet. I will do my best work in the quiet. I'm going to take 3 hours on Friday. You have my cell phone. I'm going to be on GChat. And just trying a little bit of a pilot and easing in might be really effective. But I think not being afraid to say, we all feel that way, right? It is a very draining environment, and so don't be ashamed.
Thanks for coming again. And I guess first thing I'll say is that Google has some very nice bathrooms, so please feel free to take advantage. My question is, I guess I find myself in a little bit of a flip of the situation that you described, in the sense that, like, day to day I'm interacting with a lot of people around here, and outside of that, I find like I have zero energy for social networking, right? Like for online networking, right? I have zero energy to put stuff even on Google Plus internally, much less, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, right? And it feels like there are these very big channels of being connected, interacting with people, having influence, blah, 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 that I'm not participating in because I just don't feel I have this sort of introvert energy to participate in those. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
I just want to say I hear you. I feel the same. I feel sometimes that participating online is almost more of a challenge. And and that you do have to force yourself. But I would ask yourself, why? I think a lot of us feel this sense of FOMO, right? I know I should be doing this. I should be gaining influence. I should be building my personal brand. My question is why?
FOMO,
Yeah.
fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out. So that's my question to you. What's your motivation for building the influence? And then, okay, I want to write. Do you want to make a creative contribution? Do you want to grow your network for potential future career opportunities? Do you just want to build your online landscape, your online footprint, your online profile? Maybe pick one simple way. For me, it's always been writing. I'm comfortable writing. I like to write. So blogging was so natural for me, and I didn't push myself for the other parts of social media that made me feel naked. I think that there are ways to build your online footprint that are less social, but equally legit. Photography, video, recipes, writing. So maybe start there, but I think it's also okay to say, why? Who says I have to do this right now? And like baby steps.
Hey, thanks for coming. So I have a question sort of on behalf of my partner who's currently trying to get a leg into a career doing like animation. And she's spending a ton of time building up a portfolio. She's going to start applying to jobs soon. And I think she has a challenge now where she's an outsider looking to break into an industry where she's doesn't have a lot of connections. What would you say to someone like that who's trying to get into a place where they're networking and meeting people and finding opportunities when they're starting from zero?
That's tough, right? This is where conferences actually can be very helpful. And because she does want to get into a very specific industry, I mean, I would encourage it to even go a little bit deeper than animation. You know, is there a certain area? Does she want to do entertainment? Does she want to do scientific? Does she want to do technical? I don't know. But what I would do, honestly, this sounds so basic, is I would start on Twitter and use some search term seeking and find out who's writing. This is what I would tell my clients too. Who's writing about it? Are there animators tweeting? Who are people on YouTube who have big followings? I would start following them, and I would figure out what are the publications they cite or contribute to, message boards, websites, and is there a conference they go to? Honestly. And then she needs to sort of have a battle plan. I would challenge her, if there's a conference in LA, for example, where she says, you know, potential employers are going to be there, this person that I really want to work for is speaking. That's the place where she's got to have her plan, and she's got to, you know, figure out her online strategy ahead of time. She's got a good website. She's got a good portfolio. Is she following the right people on Twitter? Go to the conference, have a strategy, try to meet, you know, 5 people. Maybe she can bring an extrovert with her and do it. Because when you are going to break in, you sometimes have to get out there, and sometimes the FaceTime of a conference is actually really great. It just is.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Typical sorts of things to bring up in a talk like this that don't apply so much to Google are how are the workplaces lacking in ways that makes these challenges greater, and how can the companies change?
I would say just in general, and I don't know if this is an issue in Google. I've never worked here. I've read a lot about it. My personal passion is helping really successful, ambitious people claim the space and the quiet they need to get their job done. For a lot of people, it's working from home. It's getting out of the open plan. There was a great reported story on a blog that, you know, the Apple $5 billion headquarters, it's all pod, it's all open plan. So one of the senior engineers actually had a bit of a palace coup and insisted he have his own building with private spaces built. I don't know if that's true or not, but I was like, yes. So if I had one dream for workplaces to change, it would be that managers stop looking at the person who's always in the office as their most ambitious person, and look at the person who does the best work, right? I feel that we equate FaceTime, seeming enthusiasm, team spirit, all this stuff with ambition and skill, and that's actually not the case at all. If I could have, you know, grown through the corporate ladder and worked from home 2 mornings a week, I would have been really happy. So I would like people to stop to decouple ambition from FaceTime, and certainly from extroversion.
I was going to say, I don't know if this is a question or response to something that somebody else asked, but are you familiar with Rest by Alex Pang?
Yes, I quote
'cause-
it in the book.
Yeah, because he talks a bit about, many intellectuals or quiet people or whatever who, would do an hour or two of work and then go out on a walk for, an hour, hour and a half, something like that. And to me, I have certainly done that here at Google when I need quiet time by myself to think about something, right? The problem is you can't bring like a laptop with you and type, but, around here, sometimes that's the only time you can get quiet for 30 minutes.
I just want to acknowledge that and to say, again, it sounds so basic, but the ability to claim your time to think is really powerful. And I know that Google's always been a leader and that you've had your, is it 20% rule or whatever, but so few places in our life give us a moment to be with our thoughts and get creative. And that's a discipline at work that we need to honor.
Hey, another question.
Sure.
Since you brought up Hillary's campaign, I was curious. Yeah, I guess if you were going to do that, right, having those like small conversations, how would you have gone about, I guess, like changing the way that she sort of went across America and had these conversations?
Oh, so politics.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah, it's not really like a.
No, I have been thinking about this because as a sort of digital political consultant, I've been thinking, and there's actually a candidate running, you should check her out, Laura Moser, in Texas, who started something called the Daily Action, which is online action. She's a bit of an introvert, so I'm going to see how she's running. Again, I think that we don't always get the best candidates because so much of being a politician is that glad handling, small talk. I mean, if we think walking into a tech networking event is bad, imagine walking into like a firehouse dinner in a different state, a firehouse breakfast every, I mean, oh my gosh, that's hell for an introvert. So I would love to see candidates win who could, either use online conversations. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could have Skype conversations, if you could use all these tools to connect with people in a meaningful way, convene smaller groups. Usually small groups are just, only high donors get small groups now, high dollar donors. And yet politicians are expected to be so extroverted at the detriment to the skill of policy. I think this is something we're all going to deal with. We're dealing with diversity at work styles. We're dealing with failed styles of leadership. I think we need to rethink all of our different temperaments and how leaders can be different kinds of people, to your point, and that will happen in the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, here's to seeing how the future accommodates and how introverts
Yes.
adapt. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.